Welcome to Empowered. I'm your host, Jessica Flynn of thejessicaflynn.com, and our show is on a mission to unleash local wisdom for widespread impact. We're committed to inspiring positive change and empowerment in our small community and beyond. Joining us today is an advocate and style expert. Myles Sexton is a multifaceted creative director, stylist, makeup artist, and HIV/AIDS and sobriety activist. Myles is not only recognized for their vibrant contributions to the fashion industry as a queer fashion nomad, but also for their impactful advocacy work, which we'll talk about today. As a non-binary individual, Myles brings a unique perspective to the table, challenging societal norms and fostering inclusivity. With editorial work featured in top publications like Vogue Italia and the New York Times, and collaborations with renowned celebrities, Myles is also a prominent voice in promoting HIV and diversity and inclusion education. Today, we'll delve into the crucial work Myles is doing in these areas and explore the intersection of art and advocacy in the fight for equality. Without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Myles Sexton to our little stage.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
So excited to be here.
So excited to be here. I was just in awe of the first time I met you in person, which was in a training session that you led. And I'm still a little bit fangirly that you agreed to come on our show. So,
of course,
so
you
excited.
You are such a beautiful light of a person, and I could not imagine not having this conversation.
Same.
So
yes.
This
Okay.
is so great.
And we'll have fun. And I really do. Just to set the scene a little bit about why I think it's so important to have you on all sorts of platforms speaking about this work. I came to it as a mother who, with young kids, I don't know who they are. They don't know who they are yet. I want to make sure that they grow up in a world that supports and loves them. I'm also an educator working with youth, starting a school. We want to make sure we're doing all the right things to provide nurturing environments for them. So we're here to learn from you, Myles.
Love it.
Yay. Okay, so let's get into it. You have this amazing art, media, fashion career. Could you start by sharing with us what inspired you to become such a strong advocate in the HIV/AIDS space?
Yeah, I mean, so when I was diagnosed, I think I was 26 going on 27, and you know, it was probably one of the most traumatic things that has ever happened to me, you know, getting diagnosed with HIV, because I think there's so much social stigma that still exists around HIV. You know, people still think it's a death sentence. People don't realize that I can live a normal, healthy life, you know, once on like medication and treatment. You know, and so I think a part of, I guess, like the stigma that I was facing from the outside world when I was just trying to like live and accept and just figure out who I was again, you know, after becoming positive, you know, I just realized that there's a lot of work that still needed to be done. And, you know, that we sort of had a lot of awareness happen from like the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s when, you know, the beginning of the HIV epidemic was happening. But now we're sort of in this moment where people aren't talking about it anymore, even though it's like, you know, literally like every single day there's like there's 4 new people being diagnosed with HIV in Canada, and like we actually have like a rise in newly like diagnosed cases. So you know, it's just like, it's a little scary that it's like that you know, the virus is still here and it still exists, but like people aren't talking about it as much. And I want to sort of just get out there and like educate people again on like what the future of HIV looks like, because now there's so much prevention that exists and so much like care and treatment that like people just have no idea about.
So what does the future of HIV look like?
Yeah, I mean, like what's so exciting is that like soon in Canada we're gonna have like I'm on an injection of my medication, so like I get an injection every 2 months of my medication, and that's it.
Every 2 months.
And yeah, but it's like soon we're just waiting for it to get approved. It's gonna be every 6 months. So it's which is so cool, you know, to think it's like, you know, I get an injection of my medication hopefully soon every 6 months, and then like that's it, you know. So it's just like
life-changing.
It is completely life-changing, you know. And I think like, and because of that, like I can't transmit, you know, HIV to anyone else, like even through unprotected sex or anything like that. So it's like, you know, I think that is so huge, you know, and that the fact that it like doesn't affect my immune system is like gets to stay normal, and like I get to again live a very healthy life and the same life expectancy as anyone else. So it's pretty powerful.
Yes, that's Incredible. And
Yeah.
December 1st is Global HIV
World
Awareness.
AIDS Day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what have you done? Like, what does your advocacy look like in this space?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the work that I do is online, like creating like education videos, I go on a lot of podcasts. I work with a nonprofit called CanFAR. So they're one of the largest like fundraising and research like non-for-profits that exist in Canada. We raise like millions of dollars every single year towards like HIV research and like helping to create like access to like treatment and care. So around World AIDS Day, we host this big event called Bloor Street Entertains, where like last year, I think it was like $1.5 million we raised in one evening. So
Myles.
it's pretty amazing.
Okay, that's one of those Toronto events I want to
Yes!
attend this year.
Please
Yes.
come.
Oh, well, thank
Yeah.
you for doing all of that work. It's
Of
so
course.
important. And I imagine also not easy to
No.
be the one standing up and putting yourself out there to tell this story.
It's definitely tough. I had an interview go up this last week, and it reached a new audience of people that didn't know a lot about HIV, and it's a lot when I have hundreds of people every single day telling me like I'm disgusting, and that they just don't understand what
Such
the
a lack
future
of
of it is.
education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it definitely is hard, but I think it's important, and for us to collectively make change, I think there needs to be people to like put correct information out there about what it looks like now. So.
Well, and just know that you've got so many people who need you to do that work and who are loving and supporting
Yes,
you. I know you
agreed.
that. But, so on that then, what do
Yeah.
you see the role of education for these populations of people who are still in that judgment space, who really don't understand the disease? So the role of education playing in transforming public perceptions of HIV.
Totally, because I think, so now with like the newly diagnosed cases, like 1 in 4 of those new cases is now in women. And it's the first time that we actually saw a shift that there's more like heterosexual people that are being diagnosed with HIV versus like gay men,
Right.
where it was very
In
much
the 80s, 90s
exactly.
epidemic.
When it was started, it was very much like a gay men's disease, but now that's totally changed. But I think that is because of what education has done. There's been so many campaigns that have targeted the queer spaces to teach them about PrEP and and about like what U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. Like all of this, they've done such a great job, and now we've seen the decline. Right. But then we have all of these other groups of people.
I even read that
right?
like mother can transmit it to a baby.
Yeah, totally. And like, but if you're on a medication, you can totally have a baby without it.
Right.
So it's like, so there's just so much like, there's so much more education that we need to target this like sort of the heterosexual demographic to teach them, because I think people are just a bit naive and to think that it's not going to affect them, right?
So how can community members like myself and our viewers support this campaign, do this, so you don't have to be doing it alone, or I know you're supported with your nonprofit, but what can the community do to help with spreading proper education?
Totally. I think it's just like, it's contacting, I think, your local school boards and like asking if they're teaching about these types of things in the curriculum, especially around like sexual health. Like, how are they teaching about HIV? I think it's also about holding like community seminars if like people want to learn about it. It's Collingwood's been so great that we've been able to do a lot of these like safe space trainings within the town. Like, how about holding seminars, around like informing people on like sort of the updated things when it comes to like sexual health, right?
Yeah.
And then, always like I always say, with social media is another really powerful tool. The more that we can like share content with our like groups of people on social media, like oftentimes like that will help to teach other people about things that they might not necessarily like would see, but because we know each other now, you're sharing a piece of my content that's like now targeting your demographic that probably wouldn't necessarily maybe see things about HIV, right?
Widespread impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you for taking us on this journey,
Of
and we will
course.
definitely continue supporting. You've also been a trailblazer in pushing for more representation in the fashion industry and beyond. I mean, you're obviously a fashionista, stylist. I wanted to introduce you as a Canadian style icon because I truly think you are. So consider adding that into your professional bio. But what challenges, before we go to the break, we're going to start talking about diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
So in the fashion space, what challenges are you still seeing in achieving diversity and inclusion in fashion and media?
Yeah, you know, when I think the Black Lives Matter movement happened, like we saw this really great shift of like looking at like cultural diversities like within fashion. Like we were seeing a lot more representation. But like, you know, I think looking at ethnic background is only like one part of diversity and inclusion, right? It's like, are we featuring like people of like different ages? You know, because a lot of the time when we look at fashion, like most people that you see in advertising are probably under the age of 16, even though they don't look like it. But like literally, it's like most of them are like literally teenagers that are made to look like they're adults, which is like.
So as a woman who's had children and like.
Exactly.
I used to look like that when I was 16,
100%.
but
That
if I think that woman is my age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like looking for age diversity is like a big one. You know, also size diversity. Like, how are we showing real bodies? You know, that exist that are outside of like what the sample size is. I think is so important. And then also when we look at like gender identity, you know, how are we like focusing and just celebrating? I think like marketing content around not just like heterosexuality, but like also just like let everyone feel included, you know, and like show diverse people that have like different gender identities, whether it's like two men or a non-binary person or a trans woman or a trans man, you know, it's like I think that there's just so much opportunity there that we can like diversify even further, I think, in like marketing.
And you're really involved in the Canadian fashion and design scene. So are you seeing new designers that are making these accommodations and not making accommodations, but celebrating diversity in their
So we're seeing like a lot of just like gender neutral brands, like brands that are just like removing this sort of like men's and women's binary when it comes to like creating fashion and just like creating a fashion brand, you know? And it's like at the end of the day, like the clothes that we wear is fabric that we're choosing to like as self-expression and maybe something that brings us joy. And I oftentimes like think it's so silly that we have these sort of like very gendered roles when it comes to fashion when, you know, when we really look at the history of fashion, it's like all genders have worn basically almost everything, you know? It's like, it's pretty fascinating.
You just posted a reel on your Instagram telling the history of a high-heeled boot.
Yeah, exactly.
And that they were created for men.
Totally. They were like cavalry would wear them in like, you know, in Persia to like hold their foot in the stirrup, and that's how sort of the high heel was created. And then eventually it made it into fashion where only men were wearing them at the beginning, you know, and then eventually women started wearing them. But it's like, you know, so.
This is what I love about your brand, Myles, and the content you're putting out. It's so holistic and it's really breaking down barriers of how we used to do things and just celebrating being ourselves. So when we come back from the break, we're going to talk more with Myles about their diversity and inclusion training. I've actually gotten to receive some of this training. The way that Myles does it is incredible. So come back with us on Empowered. I'm your host, Jess Flynn. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm your host, Jess Flynn, and we are having an incredible conversation with Myles Sexton. Myles, you and I first met at a live diversity and inclusion training that the Rainbow Club of South Georgian Bay put on. And I had attended a virtual training before. And I just truly respect and fell in love with the way that you delivered our training back in June, which was the original reason I wanted you on the show. I'm like, this training needs to be in every living room, in every organization. So can you tell us, our viewers, a little bit about what your trainings cover and what participants can expect?
Absolutely. So the training that we did together, it's really, you know, I really want to create like a space that people feel comfortable and empowered, because I know, like, you know, we're all learning and we're all growing, and it's you know, it can be uncomfortable, and that's okay. And I wanted to create a space where we can ask those questions.
You did, yeah.
So we really go through sort of like the difference between like gender identity and sexuality, and like how those are two very separate things. We go through sort of like,
I'm going to pause there because I love the way you explained it. Can you go through the difference?
Of course. So, you know, someone's gender identity is like, it's how they like sort of like showcase themselves like to the world. So it is very much like an internal feeling of like how they want to express themselves, you know? So as someone like myself who's like non-binary, you know, I never felt that like I wanted to present, I guess, like to the world as, you know, as a man or as a woman, but I felt like I was somewhere in between. I enjoy like my femininity and my masculinity, and I never really wanted to choose. So exactly, you know, so that's why it's like, you know, when we think of gender identity, it's sort of like how you would express yourself. And then someone's sexuality is about sort of like the gender or genders in which you're attracted to. So you know, that could be romantic connection, or that could be like sexual connection, you know, and oftentimes I think people like mix them up. They like you know, obviously they'll look at someone like myself and they'll be like, oh, you know, because I'm maybe dressed more effeminately, they just like assume that I'm queer or gay, you know, and you know, so it's just like I really like, I want people to start like separating the sort of idea of like gender identity and sexuality, because oftentimes they have nothing to do with each other.
What stuck with me was you said one is between the ears and one's between the legs.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, right? Like, I think gender very much is like, it is an internal feeling, and like, yes, there's what, you know, when we look at like the scientific sort of piece of like, you know, the argument oftentimes comes down to like chromosomes and how, you know, we all have chromosomes, but like, then where do like intersex people fit in that, who are born with like, you know, some intersex people are born with XY chromosomes and present
There's how many
female.
Billions of us on the planet? Like, how can we all be one or like one of two things?
Exactly. You know, and there's just like, there's hundreds of species of animals that not only can change their gender to like procreate, but like have more than two genders. And, you know, it's a very big topic, but like we really go through a lot of this in the training. It does, you know, and we teach a lot about like sort of the history of gender identity and sort of like how sort of the impact of like colonization has sort of like eradicated a lot of like gender, like having more than two gender identities. You know, there's cultures that are older than, you know, religion itself that have had, you know, more than two genders within their cultures. You know, we have like, we now use the term like two-spirit in North America for like indigenous communities.
Of two-spirit.
Totally, but you know, that was a very like celebrated role within their society, and it was looked at as like a third gender within their categories. You have like in India, you have the Hijra, who is still to this day like a recognized third gender category for a lot of non-binary and trans people. In like Central and South America, you have the Mushe people, so same sort of idea, but like, you know, these within cultures all over the world, you have these people. They've always existed. It's not new.
Yes.
It's as old as, you know, time immemorial, right? So.
I love it. And then you took us through kind of the rainbow, so to speak, like learning just basic terminology.
Exactly.
Because I think too, especially in a smaller town like where our training was held, where the folks in the community themselves may not be the majority, but we have people who want to be allies.
Totally.
And so in that particular room, I was there to learn about how do I become an ally and just get the basics of love and respect and making sure I'm using the right terminology. All summer using they, them pronouns has been such a fun learning experience. I feel like I'm getting to the point where it's just part of the language now.
Exactly.
And you talked about that in the training too.
We did. Yeah, we go through a lot of like language. We go through like just what are some like sort of basic things that we can do to create safer spaces for everyone. You know, like I think with the training, we really try to hit a lot of like the key categories, I think, when it comes to like just creating safe spaces for everyone and learning about like our community, because, you know, I think a lot of the time people look at the 2S LGBTQIA+, you know, this like alphabet soup that we kind of, you know, that we use to like describe our community, because it's like, you know, it's so diverse, and it's just as diverse as like, you know, when we look at like ethnic diversity, right? So it's.
But also, I think we have to get to a point where your community is our community.
Yes.
Our neighbors, you're our teachers,
Totally.
you know?
And we are there. It's just some, depending on where you are, it just doesn't always feel safe to be that person.
And that's
you
where
know?
like we as the viewers and the community need to be attending these trainings, following and supporting individuals like Myles, so that, you know, we can live in harmony.
Yeah,
Come on. Yeah. So this particular training that we attended, so it was the Rainbow Club of South Georgian Bay organized it for business owners who are participating in Collingwood Pride.
Yes.
When else should or can organizations call on you for this kind of training? And what are the common issues you're seeing in organizations that do call on you for support?
Yeah, I think honestly just the biggest one is just not, like, I think when we don't have things that like personally affect ourselves, then like sometimes we're just unaware, you know, of maybe like things that we're not doing, or like ways that we could be more inclusive, right? And, you know, I think within a lot of organizations, I think a lot of them, you know, now it's starting to change, but it's still like very much like a white heterosexual male is like usually the head of like a lot of organizations, and like, you know, so it's just like that sort of mentality of like, okay, but there's so many other diverse groups of people that are working underneath of that, like how do we create this work environment that's going to be safe for, you know, not only just people within my community, but for women and different people from different racial backgrounds, you know? And it's like, I just think that when you have these types of like trainings or doing sort of lunch and learns or whatever you want to call it, it just sort of like helps to start that dialogue within your organization to like create, I think, active change within the organization to like make it a safer space for everyone.
And there's a difference between putting a different sign on a bathroom door and actually making it a part of your company's culture.
Totally. It's so true, you know, because like even, you know, the whole sort of like washroom debate that we have going on right now, I think is a really good example. It's like, you know, a lot of people were like, okay, now all washrooms are gender neutral, but like that doesn't really just like set you up for success either, because like unless the washrooms are a single use washroom, then now you have like a full washroom of like where everyone's going in it, and maybe like women don't feel safe with like other men being in the washroom, and you know, so there's a lot more to just than changing a sign. You know, you have to look at like the data of like what is working and what's not working, right? So.
And I think too, in terms of businesses or organizations considering this kind of training, not only for their internal teams, but I think it's better business. You can better serve your client base, your customers, and truly, and not again just slapping a sticker on the window to say, I did this training, but like really living and breathing safe and inclusive spaces.
It's so true. You know, like I think that for someone like myself, you know, I have so much like anxiety when it comes to like going in, like accessing services or going into like businesses, because like, you know, I've just had so many bad experiences in my life of like being told that like I don't belong in this space, you know, whether it's like me going into like what's a women's clothing store and wanting to shop for something and being asked to leave because like I present masculine, you know, and it's like, so it's just like things like that, like, you know, we want to create a safe space for everyone to feel comfortable and like not have to like deal with these.
And your training where you were transparent and shared those stories, because as someone who wasn't thinking as much of the details, when I had a stroller, I was then thinking of accessibility for folks in wheelchairs. So sharing your story really does bring it to light, where then we need to solve these problems with you
100%.
And not leave it just to you.
Exactly.
So as we're getting close to wrapping up, we'll have to have Myles back. But speaking of what the community can do, if you can talk us a little bit through what your experience was like growing up and how that's influenced how you've come here. And then we can almost start working backwards. How can we start younger to make spaces more inclusive?
I mean, like, you know, so I grew up in a really remote like farming community in Nova Scotia. So like, you know, I didn't even know queer people existed, you know, because I didn't grow up with television or the internet. Like I had no access to it. So naturally who I was wanting to be. You know, I was like naturally gravitated towards like effeminate things, and like, you know, I wanted to like celebrate my divine femininity, and it was always sort of used as like a weapon against me, and I was told that I was wrong for like wanting to feel fabulous, you know. And it's like, it's so silly. And you know, so I think I never wanted, I don't want other people out there to like go through the same thing that I went through, you know. Like, I almost didn't make it, you know, past the age of 16 because of just how I grew up, you know. And it was so hard to like not just be able to be the authentic person that I wanted to be, you know. And I had to suppress so much of who I was and hide out of my safety, you know. And so, you know, I think because of that sort of like trauma and journey, it's just like inspired me so much to be like, how can I like share my story? How can I share my journey? How can I teach people about, you know, through my story, like what it's been like in order to try to like make this world a safer and more inclusive place? Because I don't want any of those little baby Myles out there going through what I went through, because, you know, I think it takes more time and energy to be like hateful and to like invest that into fear versus like sitting and having like and being empathetic, then being empathetic. And I think if we can just have a little bit more empathy for like people or things that we don't understand and be open to having a conversation, that I think that we can like collectively create so much global change.
Mic drop, like incredible.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, your resilience, you're such a bright light now, being a part of so much systematic change. We're so fortunate that you had that strength and resilience in those earlier years when you were 16, so that you can be here doing this work. But let's not make it so difficult for next generations coming up. So in the last 30 seconds of the show, what can our viewers do to become more involved in advocating for our collective community to have more safe and inclusive spaces?
Absolutely. You know, I think just get out there and learn as much as you can about things that you don't know. You know, there's so much information available to you that, you know, I really want to encourage you to read books or go read like articles on websites, you know, to learn. You can always contact me as well through my website. You know, I have so much like material and access to like education through my videos that people can learn more from too. So
beautiful. Thank you. Well, definitely encourage you to check out MylesSexton.com and their Instagram account, because their videos they're great, they're quick, tons of education. But thank you for joining us on this truly inspiring and empowering episode of Empowered. I'm your host, Jessica Flynn, and tune in next time on Rogers TV.